Hi there, I'm Patch, and you'll be reading with me today. Today we're going to be reading Night Shift by Stephen King. Did you know that Night Shift is actually a series of short stories? Is everybody ready? Great! Now, let's settle down, grab some cocoa, and let's begin. The apartment house where Richie Grenadine had his flat was almost at the top of the hill. One of those big Victorian monsters that were built by the pulp and paper barons at the turn of the century. They'd just about all been turned into apartment houses now. When Bertie got his breath, he told us Richie lived on the third floor under the top gable that jutted out like an eyebrow. I took the chance to ask Henry what happened to the kid after that. Along about the third week in November, the kid came back one afternoon to find Richie had gone one further than just pulling the shades down. He'd taken and nailed blankets across every window in the place. It was starting to stink worse, too. Kind of a mushy stink, the way fruit trees get when it goes to ferment with yeast. A week or so after that, Richie got the kid to start heating his beer on the stove. Can you feature that? That kid all by himself in that apartment with his dad turning into something, and heating his beer and then having to listen to him, drinking it with awful thick slurping sounds. The way an old man eats his chowder. Can you imagine it? And that's the way things went on until today, when the kids schooled out early because of the storm. The boy says he went right home, Henry told us. There's no light in the upstairs hall at all. The boy claims his dad must have snuck out some night and broke it, so he had to sort of creep down to his door. Well, he heard something moving around in there, and it suddenly pops into his mind that he don't know what Richie does all day through the week. He ain't seen his dad stir out of that chair for almost a month, and a man's gotta sleep and go to the bathroom sometime. There's a Judas hole in the middle of the door, and it's supposed to have a latch on the inside to fasten it shut, but it's been busted ever since they lived there. So the kid slides up to the door real easy, and pushed it open a bit with his thumb and pokes his eye up to it. By now we're at the foot of the steps, and the house was looming over us like a high, ugly face, and with those windows on the third floor for eyes. I looked up there, and sure enough, those two windows were just as black as pitch, like somebody'd put blankets over 'em or painted 'em up. It took him a minute to get his eye adjusted to the gloom, and then he seen a great big gray lump, not like a man at all, slithering over the floor and leaving a gray, slimy trail behind it. And then it sort of snaked out an arm, or something like an arm, and pried a board off the wall. I took out a cat. Henry stopped for a second. Bertie was beating his hands together, and it was god-awful cold out there on the street. But none of us was ready to go up just yet. A dead cat, Henry recommended, that had putrefacted. The boy said it looked all swole up stiff, and there was little white things crawling all over it. Stop, Bertie said, for Christ's sake. And then his dad ate it. I tried to swallow, and something tasted greasy in my throat. That's when Timmy closed the peephole, Henry finished softly, and ran. I don't think I can go up there, Bertie said. Henry didn't say nothing, just looked from Bertie to me and back again. I guess we better, I said. We got Richie's beer. Bertie didn't say anything to that, so we went up the steps and through the front hall door. I smelled it right off. Do you know how a cider house smells in the summer? You never get the smell of apples out, but in the fall, it's all right, because it smells tangy and sharp enough to ream your nose right out. But in the summer, it just smells mean. The smell was like that, but a little bit worse. There was one light on in the lower hall, a mean yellow thing in a frosted glass that threw a glow as thin as buttermilk, and those stairs that went up into the shadows. Henry bumped the cart to a stop, and while he was lifting out the case of beer, I thumbed the button at the foot of the stairs that controlled the second floor landing bulb. But it was busted. just as the boy said. Bertie quavered, "I'll lug the beer. You just take care of that pistol." Henry didn't argue. He handed it over and we started up. Henry first, then me, then Bertie with the case in his arms. By the time we had fetched the second-floor landing, the stink was just that much worse. Rotted apples, all fermented, and under that an even uglier stink. When I lived out in Leven, I had a dog one time. Rex, his name was. And he was a good mutt, but not very wise about cars. He got hit a lick one afternoon when I was at work, and he crawled under the house and died there. My Christ, what a stink. I finally had to go under and haul him out with a pole. That other stench was like that, fly-blown and putrid and just as dirty as a boring cob. Up till then, I had kept thinking that maybe it was some sort of joke, but I saw it wasn't. "Lord, why don't the neighbors kick up Harry?" I asked. "What neighbors?" Henry asked. And he was smiling a queer smile again. I looked around and saw that the hall had a sort of dusty, unused look, and the door of all 3 second-floor apartments was closed and locked up. "Who's the landlord, I wonder?" Bertie asked, resting the case on the newel post and getting his breath. "Gittal? Surprised he don't kick 'em out." "Who'd go up there and evict him?" Henry asked. "You?" Bertie didn't say nothing. Presently we started up the next flight, which was even narrower and steeper than the last. It was getting hotter, too. It sounded like every radiator in the place was clanking and hissing. The smell was awful, and I started to feel like someone was stirring my guts with a stick. At the top was a short hall, and one door with a little Judas hole in the middle of it. Bertie made a soft little cry and whispered out, "Look what we're walking in." I looked down and saw all this slimy stuff on the floor, in little puddles. It looked like there'd been a carpet once, but the gray stuff had eaten it all away. Henry walked down to the door, and we went after him. I don't know about Bertie, but I was shaking in my shoes. Henry never hesitated, though. He raised up that gun and beat on the door with the butt of it. "Richie?" he called, and his voice didn't sound a bit scared, although his face was deadly pale. "This is Henry Parmalee, from down at the Night Owl. I brought your beer." There wasn't any answer for perhaps a full minute, and then a voice said, "Where's Timmy? Where's my boy?" I almost ran right then. That voice wasn't human at all. It was queer and low and bubbly, like someone talking through a mouthful of suet. "He's at my store," Henry said, "having a decent meal. He's just as skinny as a slack cat, Richie." There wasn't nothing for a while, and then some horrible squishing noises, like a man in rubber boots walking through mud. And that decayed voice spoke right through the other side of the door. "Open the door and shove that beer through," it said. "Only you gotta pull all the ring tabs first." "I can't." "In a minute," Henry said. "What kind of shape you in, Richie?" "Never mind that," the voice said. It was horribly eager. "Just push the beer in and go." "It ain't just dead cats anymore, is it?" Henry said, and he sounded sad. He wasn't holding the gun butt up anymore. Now it was business end first. And suddenly, in a flash of light, I made the mental connection Henry had already made, perhaps even as Timmy was telling a story. The smell of decay and rot seemed to double in my nostrils when I remembered. 2 young girls and some old Salvation Army wino had disappeared in town during the last 3 weeks or so, all after dark. "Send it in or I'll come out and get it," the voice said. Henry gestured us back, and we went. "I guess you better, Richie." He cocked his piece. There was nothing then, for a long time. To tell the truth, I began to feel as if it was all over. And that door burst open so suddenly and so hard that it actually bulged before slamming out against the wall. And out came Richie. It was just a second. Just a second before Bertie and me was down those stairs like school kids, 4 and 5 at a time, and out the door into the snow, slipping and sliding. Going down, we heard Henry fire 3 times. Their reports loud as grenades in the closed hallways of that empty, cursed house. When we saw in that 1 or 2 seconds will last me a lifetime, or whatever's left of it. It was like a huge gray wave of jelly that looked like a man and leaving a trail of slime behind it. But that wasn't the worst. Its eyes were flat and yellow and wild with no human soul in them. Only there wasn't 2. There were 4, and right down the center of the thing, betwixt the 2 pairs of eyes, was a white, fibrous line with a kind of pulsing pink flesh showing through like a slit in a hog's belly. It was dividing, you see, dividing in 2. Bertie and I didn't say nothing to each other going back to the store. I don't know what was going through his mind, but I know well enough what was in mine. A multiplication table. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 2 is 16. 16 times 2 is... We got back. Carl and Bill Pelham jumped and started asking questions right off. We wouldn't answer. Neither of us. We just turned around and waited to see if Henry was gonna walk in out of the snow. I was up to 32,768 times 2 is the end of the human race. And so we sat there cozied up to all that beer and waited to see which one was going to finally come back. And here we still sit. I hope it's Henry. I surely do.